Welcome to Wisdom School. Yeah! This is a historic first, perhaps even in the history of the planet. Never before, at least since Babylon, have so many wisdom seekers been gathered in a single place at a single time. I think this is not so much a wisdom school as a wisdom convention. and I think that the synchronicity of this gathering taking place at this particular point in time and place in the history of our planet is not without implication. That we really are here as wisdom seekers have been from time immemorial, as seekers after truth, as seekers after compassion, not to be here to search for our personal enlightenment, but to hold the space and deepen the level of conscious compassion on our planet. So I think in that way, I'd like us, when we first gathered with the interns 2 days ago, to begin to prepare the way for your coming with us, coming on board, all of you. We started first by sensing ourselves as a small group of people in time, here on one level to help orchestrate a production, a wisdom school. But on the other level, a group of people who've come together to be available in a deep way to what T.S. Eliot once called the intersection of the timeless and time, and how things are impacting and playing in our world. We are a gathered group of people. What we possess already and are going to be possessing a lot more by the time the week is over is synergy, which is the power of each person's individual yearning multiplied by 200, multiplied by 2 million. As we begin to organize and tap into that power of yearning, faith, idealism, and willing service that is in this group. So I'm quite in awe of this gathering as a prophetic and potentially healing gathering. And I would ask us to offer all of our work this week, and not just the moments of triumph, but the moments of real frustration that you encounter and look at closely and work with rather than running from. All of that work is part of the offering we make this week for whatever use the planet may need it for. So what I wanted to do tonight is to just go over a few little basic orientation things and then walk you through the schedule a little bit and call attention to some of the highlights just enough so that we can get off and running tomorrow. A lot of stuff you're going to just learn as you go along. We can't do the thing of teaching you the whole theory first and then having you practice for the rest of the week. We're going to be moving back and forth, so we'll get a little bit of a bite of something as an idea. We'll work on it. We'll come back and unpack it as an idea, and back and forth it'll go. So this is your first overall view. And as I've said often, and if you've read the whole Wisdom Way of Knowing book, wisdom has a billion different definitions out in the planet. It goes everywhere on the scale from secret esoteric information, generally orgiastic and ritualistic in nature, done behind closed doors, to the other, the sort of familiar chicken soup wisdom, where it refers to the kind of often folksy and humorous things that are known by just being around here for a while. Our definition of wisdom, which comes through a specific lineage that I'll be talking more about in due course, is something very akin to what in the past few years has become popularized as integral knowing. What it means is not knowing more, but knowing with more of you, knowing deeper, carving and digging your being deeper and deeper so that it can receive more knowing. And the knowing, as it's often been talked about in wisdom traditions, is state-dependent. It's not hidden. It's as plain as the nose on your face. But unless you have got, as they love to say in the Bible, eyes to see and ears to hear, it can be sitting right there in the room with you, sitting on the nose on your face, and you won't see it. So one of my favorite sayings in the wisdom tradition goes, as your being increases, your receptivity to higher meaning increases. As your being decreases, the old meanings return. Which basically means, and we'll be back to that one a few more dozen times, but as you become more settled, more deep, more balanced, as you bring all the wonderful systems within you online for the genuine present moment apprehension of what's going on in this world, then you begin to see things that you've missed before. You know, you could walk past the same old building 3 million times and suddenly look at it and say, hey, I never noticed that beautiful cornice. It's like that. So what we're really trying to do is not so much fill you with new information, but sort of deepen a capacity within you to see in a way that you've never seen before, to connect dots in a way that may remain unconnected. And we'll be giving you a little bit of a time-tested roadmap in our own tradition that will allow you to form a kind of template around that for continuing transformation once you go home from wisdom school. So there, by some arguments, wisdom schools have always been here. They go back at least as far as Babylon, if not all the way back to Atlantis. That by some accounts, they represent an unbroken stream passing on a certain body of conscious transformational knowledge. And all the religions, all the great sacred traditions, in some sense, are putting their roots down into that deeper well. But the schools also tend to come above ground and take shape, really begin to have a much more visible presence at those times in the history of humanity, at those critical turning points, when the world is in a time of really critical mass, critical velocity, upheaval or change or need. One of our interns today came back and said, hey, did you hear what Pope Francis just said? He says, this is not an era of change, this is a change of era. And in that regard, it's exactly there at the changes of era that wisdom schools tend to come above ground. A gift of what some indeed call, and I don't think it's a metaphor, the conscious circle of humanity. Those wise elders, some in the flesh and some beyond the flesh, who sort of encircle this planet with loving arms and help give course corrections as we go kicking and screaming into what's coming up at the next evolutionary turn. So I don't think we need to detain ourselves far by saying we're obviously in such an era. Old orders are passing away. Old institutions are in distress. The change in the kind of orientation and education and facility that's gone place just between the generation that I was born in, the kind of mid-boomers, and the millennials that sit here as the youngest among us. We've gone through a change in orientation and the handling of knowledge, which leaves Gutenberg in the dust. You know, we're really in an era of massive upheaval. Wisdom schools emerge, and I think that it's no great surprise that it's carrying an energy and an interest that you can feel palpably, because the water's flowing here right now. It may not flow here forever, but it's here. So we're going to run with that living water. A little bit about this particular lineage that I'll be bringing you during the week, the place that I'm speaking from. It really is a fusion of two streams and two strains, and you'll feel these streams and hear these streams in dialogue all week. And it's been my own particular, I won't say individual, but this has been the tradition that I've been given to carry on. So one of the streams in that is the stream that comes from very, very deep in the Christian tradition. The lineage stream coming from the wisdom of the great Benedictine monasticism. And Saint Benedict in the 5th century, drawing on an already well-established stream of transformational wisdom that came out of the deserts of Egypt and Syria by a first generation of people that really wanted to practice what it means to put on the mind of Christ. Saint Benedict became heir to this and shaped it into a massive, stable container, which has been the foundation of Christian monasticism and monastic transformational practice in the West for 1,500 years. And so its brilliant, stable legacy of ora et labora, prayer and work, as a fundamental rhythm for the balancing and ordering of human life and for the growing of that beautiful rose of wisdom. That's the Benedictine Contribution. And that is the one strand, and it's the earlier strand in my own wisdom formation. I've been a kind of monastic wannabe for 40 years now. And most of my own deep formation in the Christian path has been at the hands of wonderful Benedictine abbas and ammas, both straight-up Benedictines, Trappists like Thomas Merton, that lineage. So that, you'll hear, is one of the streams. What's a little bit unusual in my presentation of wisdom is that the other strain in it comes from my 10 or 15 years of active participation in what's called the work, the transformational teaching of G.I. Gurdjieff, or Gurdjieff, depending on what kind of a group you get yourself into. That wonderful Russian-Armenian spiritual seeker who was the first to really go at what we would nowadays recognize clearly under the label mindfulness practice. who clearly felt that there was a missing piece, particularly as regarded the West, that kept people always stuck in their heads and simply recycling the same old cognitive knowledge without ever changing. And he went to look for the piece that might change things and brought it back to the West in a teaching that's been passed on for many years below the radar screen. And then it all kind of came above the radar screen when the Enneagram of Personality movement broke wide open, and all of a sudden people had heard of his name, since he was the one who first brought it to the West. I worked in the group, and I still have very, very deep connections, but from my 10 years in the work, mostly in Canada, I learned the piece which was never fully articulated in the Benedictine tradition, which is that the whole piece of conscious work. What does it mean to be awake when you work? What is presence? How do you find it? How do you notice when you've fallen out of it? And even more important, how do you get back into it? So in the work are this extraordinary body of knowledge and skills relating about transformation of presence. Or in other words, raising the state of your being so that you become receptive to higher meaning. So what I did was basically, with the help of a Trappist hermit monk who was my own teacher and mentor in this, fused the two together. And we offered our first wisdom school on Salt Spring Island, British Columbia in July of 1999. And it's been nonstop since then. So that's a little bit of the lineage that I've been working in. As you'll hear the pieces of that, but that's where we're going. It really, I had felt and actually had complained to my teacher at one point that I felt like the work had the bottom part of the pyramid. It had all the practices that taught you how to be present, but it didn't have a context. Present to what? And that the Trappist Benedictine tradition had the top of the pyramid, the extraordinary mysticism and devotion, the beauty, the surrender, the humility. But there was nothing that put those two together. And without a bottom, the top is just a mirage. And without the top, the bottom is just a practical skill set. So our work has been to try to get these things not only in dialogue, but fused. So that's the ambience in which you're working.